Captain America the Winter Soldier is one of the best MCU movies. I've come across a video stating that the plot is bad and nonsensical, which is an interesting challenge to the praise of the movie. So as usual, I'll listen to this person's thoughts and share my own in exchange. The goal I've set forth here is to see if I can convince this person, and others who agree with the video, to reevaluate their criticisms and see if there's more to appreciate this movie for. And of course, find an excuse to talk about a movie I enjoy.
From the start, the movie doesn't make sense. Towards the end of the film, the heroes release S.H.I.E.L.D's database to the world so that Hydra will have no assets or personnel that they can hide from it. Which means that the movie shouldn't have even happened because Tony Stark has already decoded the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. database in the previous film.
Actually, he only decrypted the S.H.I.E.L.D. database present on the helicarrier in relation to their mission regarding the Tesseract, not the files present on the Triskelion. Those two are different locations. The same S.H.I.E.L.D. files aren't just scattered to every base in relation to S.H.I.E.L.D. or Hydra. In fact, the end of Winter Soldier explicitly tells you the opposite.
Fury has released everything to the public.
Everything he knows about what we have is worth more than any of them ever knew.
They have files of their work with Loki's scepter in this Hydra base, and they explicitly state that Fury doesn't know about them. He can't access these files because they weren't accessible at the Triskelion. On top of this, why would the Hydra agents randomly feel the need to upload their files on the helicarrier? Why not keep it in the Triskelion, which is Pierce's primary workspace? Isn't that better for avoiding the risk of leaks and maintaining control of these files? I know there's a word for this.
It's called compartmentalization.
Yeah, that.
And yet he doesn't try to inform Fury or Cap about it, and there's no reference or foreshadowing to Hydra being a part of S.H.I.E.L.D. in that movie.
There's no reason for Tony to inform Fury or Cap about information he doesn't have access to.
The directors themselves even mention that this is a glaring issue.
Why didn't Tony Stark find out about Hydra when he decrypted all of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s files? How did an agency that employs thousands of people...
While I think the directors should be attentive to these details, I'd like to note that this was months after the film had been released, so the production wouldn't even be fresh in their minds, and most importantly, they are not the writers of this movie.
In the opening of the movie, Cap and the team are on a mission to rescue a S.H.I.E.L.D. vessel from terrorists. On top of some weird physics, we have a scene that I feel betrays what we know about Steve Rogers for the sake of doing something cool. In the first film, Steve makes his opinion on power and violence very clear.
I don't want to kill anyone. I don't like bullies.
Steve fought in the war, and he killed in the war, but he did so because he wanted to stop the fighting. He wanted to stop unnecessary deaths. He did what he had to do, but most importantly, he took prisoners when he could. Throughout this scene, there's several instances where Steve merely engages the enemy, knocks them unconscious, and then leaves, allowing these people to be taken prisoner. But there's also several times when he has the drop on his opponents, could easily knock them out and move on, yet goes out of his way to kill them instead. The first instance of this is in this fight scene. He comes across 3 guards stood together. This guard quickly turns around and is completely unprepared to take him on, but instead of just knocking him out as he does with the other 2 in a moment, he chooses to kick the guard so hard his back shatters against the rail of the ship, breaking the guard's spine and letting them drop into the ocean to slowly drown to death.
Just because Captain America doesn't want to kill people doesn't mean he won't do so if it benefits the mission. He doesn't have a strict no-kill rule like what we see with Spider-Man or Daredevil. This is a hostage situation where Cap needs to be quick and stealthy, so Cap is willing to risk killing someone if it means ensuring the safety of the hostages. That doesn't mean he wants to kill anyone, just that he will for the sake of saving people. There's a difference between choosing not to be a bloodlust killer versus killing off threats to protect others.
Immediately following this, there's another guard who is leaning against the rails and is unaware of Cap being there. But instead of just giving a quick sucker punch and knocking him out, Steve chooses to throw him into the stormy sea below. Once again drowning someone he could have just knocked unconscious and taken prisoner.
Knocking him off is the quicker option and makes less noise when he falls down. If he just punched him, the others nearby could hear the fall and order a kill on the hostages.
Hydra, who understands the importance of being patient and operating in secrecy, who are on the verge of achieving 3 war machines that could neutralize any enemy on the planet they want, decide that the best course of action to remove Nick from the investigation is to very publicly have 4 vehicles ram his car and shoot his vehicle with assault assault rifles in the middle of the day, in the middle of one of the biggest cities in the US, using technology far more advanced than what normal police have access to.
The goal isn't to stage a situation where the DC police officers kill Nick Fury. They don't care if people know they're not actually police officers. The purpose of this disguise is to deter people from calling the actual police, which would hinder their process. This plan also gives Fury a false sense of security at first.
Something that will very obviously be seen and recorded on the news, possibly even alerting other people in S.H.I.E.L.D. that something is wrong.
Something wrong is a very vague statement. That doesn't mean there are any leads to Hydra. At most, you can conclude that a terrorist organization attempted to have Fury killed and dressed up as police officers to do so. But how does that expose Hydra or any corruption within S.H.I.E.L.D.? There's no leads to that. And something very important that's being neglected here is that Pierce uses this assassination attempt as a way to motivate the Council to reactivate Project Insight as opposed to delaying its production.
Nick Fury was murdered in cold blood. To any reasonable person, that would make him a martyr.
This council moves to immediately reactivate Project Insight.
During Fury's escape, we then get onto my next problem. The Winter Soldier and how he's presented in this film. The Soldier is supposed to be a boogeyman in the Secret Service circles, a man that most people, even those high up in the spy networks, don't even think he exists because the feats and kills performed by him don't seem feasible for one man to pull off. He has been showing up for nearly 60 years, quickly neutralizing any and all targets in the nearby area and then leaving without a trace. Which is why most people don't believe he exists, because there's no actual evidence showing he does, which is then juxtaposed to him casually standing in the middle of the street in broad daylight, in front of all these people and all these security cameras.
So, there are a few things to account for. First of all, this isn't even Bucky's usual attire. As shown in Bucky's other assassinations, Bucky has his usual armor and metal arm exposed. When Bucky shows up on the street, he looks like he's wearing a snowboarder's outfit. Most of his usual attire is covered, so even if people recorded this, you would be left with very vague results. But setting that aside, there's an even more important factor here. Hydra is days away from the release of Project Insight, the thing that enables them to hold millions of people hostage at a time and have control over the world. So Hydra has even less reasons to be cautious about publicly displaying the Winter Soldier. They don't need the urban myth to stick. Not only will Bucky escape very easily, but even if the truth about the Winter Soldier was released to the world, it wouldn't matter by the time they've taken control of it. Even if an investigation that would take plenty of time were to be started by this, the most they would learn is that an assassin was sent to inorganically alter the outcomes of events in history, and even then, that doesn't even expose Hydra or the corruption within S.H.I.E.L.D.
Who chooses to use a grenade launcher to very loudly blow up a car. Then, instead of quickly neutralizing the target and leaving, he chooses to slowly walk towards his target to finish him off, allowing Fury to escape.
I don't know about you, but if I'm walking towards a bunch of smoke, I'd rather walk my way through instead of running there. It's not a smart idea to run towards an area where you can't see what's on the other side. Slower movement gives you more time to react to anything. Imagine if Fury planted a bomb nearby. If you're running towards the area, you would have to put more effort into running the other way versus if you walked there instead. On top of this, it's very reasonable to assume that Fury is heavily injured and couldn't make it very far from where he was, assuming he's even conscious. The purpose of walking to Fury was to simply confirm the kill. Seeing the body helps.
Later, he successfully shoots Fury, and instead of immediately taking off after hitting him, he proceeds to just stand around on the roof for another 30 seconds doing nothing.
Well, considering those shots haven't killed Fury yet, and Fury was removed out of view from the window, it makes sense to stick around to seek an opportunity to confirm the kill. Now, you could make the argument that Bucky could shoot through the walls of Cap's apartment to try this, but due to the fact he can't see them, this puts them at risk of killing Cap. Hydra doesn't want Cap dead right now because they intend to question him later. Keep in mind that this apartment is bugged, so Hydra can feed information to Bucky about what's happening, or Bucky himself could be listening to the bug. So if Bucky notices Cap distancing himself from Fury to retrieve medical supplies or attention, either through the bug or by seeing Cap run elsewhere through the window, that would open his opportunity to shoot at Fury without Cap being in the crossfire. But Cap was still close to Fury this whole time. Someone else entered, and this resulted in Cap going after Bucky, which forced his hand to book it.
And of course, there's the highway fight scene. That also has similar issues of his very public handling of the matters.
The film establishes that Pierce has become desperate because of Cap and Nat's escape, causing him to rush the scheduling of Project Insight, which makes it even less important to hide the Winter Soldier's existence.
The timetable is moved. Our window is limited. 2 targets, level 6.
These scenes are incompatible with what we were told about the character. You can't tell us that this is an individual who is essentially a ghost that is so covert and so efficient that people aren't even sure that they exist, and then have pretty much all of their scenes show them as a figure that is constantly exposing himself to the public eye and struggling to eliminate a 65-year-old man who's already injured.
It was necessary for Bucky to stay under the radar back then because Hydra had less power. Hydra is now close to taking over the world. Why would they still care as much to keep him a secret?
So Fury escapes, tries to warn Steve, gets shot, gives him the files. Steve pursues the Winter Soldier until he magically vanishes.
I mean, there's a variety of ways he could have escaped while Steve was preoccupied with catching a shield and running all the way to the edge, such as entering a window or turning to any of these streets.
Fury apparently dies on the operating table, and now Steve needs somewhere safe to store the files. Steve, using his brain, decides to hide it in a vent or one of the ceiling panels, right? Wrong. He hides it in a vending machine. Literally the only thing between some fuckwit on the street and some heavily encrypted files belonging to one of the biggest organizations on the planet is 3 packets of Hubba Bubba. Natasha even points this out later, but she shouldn't need to point this out because it's very obviously a dumb thing to do, especially when it isn't even this well hidden. If Steve was worried that he was being watched and needed somewhere quick to hide it, he could have easily just excused himself to the bathroom instead of doing whatever this was.
So there's a couple things to break down about this point. Nat pointing out how bad of an idea this was is meant to show that this is a deliberate character flaw for Cap. Cap is not experienced in espionage. Black Widow is highly experienced in espionage.
Why was Fury in your apartment?
I don't know.
You're a terrible liar. First rule of going on the run is don't run, walk.
So I think it's within Cap's character to make this mistake, and the film recognizes that this is a mistake. Now, the alternative mentioned was that he maybe could have put it in the bathroom, but if Steve excuses himself to go to the bathroom, then that could set off suspicion. Imagine if some Hydra agents decided to go to the bathroom and search any potential hiding places because they're suspicious that Steve might have went to the bathroom to hide something. That's a pretty big risk there. The idea behind Steve's plan is that he wanted to hide it in plain sight, so I don't really see this as out of character for Steve, even if this is a mistake.
I'm also not sure how Natasha knew to investigate the vending machine in the first place either, considering that she had left before Steve tried to hide anything.
Well, I assume she looked to the last place she saw Steve before he was called in for questioning.
He meets up with Natasha, and they decide to try and decrypt the files and find out what's going on. They do this by randomly wandering into an Apple store, putting the files into a basic laptop that would absolutely have the bare minimum on it, and definitely wouldn't have any spy software used to decrypt files.
The spy software is on an external hard drive. This is commonly what external hard drives are used for, storing data outside of your computers, softwares included. Oftentimes, people do this with video editing, so that it doesn't take up too much space on their computer.
And then somehow manage to hack these files that Fury couldn't get into in less than 9 minutes.
Black Widow is especially skilled with computers. She directly implies this in the scene.
This drive is protected by some sort of AI. It keeps rewriting itself to counter my commands. The person who developed this is slightly smarter than me. Slightly.
And he would be aware that Hydra is now trying to drop a missile on them right now. If this character had any sort of consistency, then he would keep the two distracted long enough for the missile to hit them, neutralizing the 2 main opponents standing in Hydra's way and ensuring that the long-term goals that he devoted his life and afterlife to would be successful. Unfortunately, because the movie needs these two to survive, the patient, crafty, cunning man who wants these two dead decides to alert them that something is wrong and that they're about to die.
Zola gave them a very short amount of time to react and even locked the doors so they couldn't leave. He only tells them they're going to die as a means of gloating, not as a means of warning them to react. They barely had time to react and were lucky to even have survived this without getting caught.
The next main issue is how this scene unfolds in general. Hydra wishes to eliminate everyone in this car, yet instead of targeting Sam and removing the driver of the vehicle, making everyone else vulnerable, or just using some sort of explosives to blow up the car, the Winter Soldier seemingly teleports out of nowhere and conveniently only kills the one person the audience doesn't care about.
Okay, it's not flawless.
The Winter Soldier is thrown off the car, a Hydra Humvee rams into the back of the heroes, and the Winter Soldier jumps back onto the car. Now, I would say that he should just use his gun to shoot the heroes who are stuck in the car, but apparently the Russos pulled a Last Jedi and digitally removed the gun in post-production, as he is clearly still holding it until it magically vanishes in this shot. On top of this, even this bad editing choice doesn't excuse him not shooting the heroes here, because he has a scorpion attached to his back and another pistol, which he could have easily used to kill them instead of randomly ripping the steering wheel out.
Okay, it's not flawless.
So they eventually escape the vehicle and Steve is hit by a grenade launcher, and I get that he is a superhero and all that, but shouldn't all of this at least injure him? Because he shows back up later absolutely no worse for wear.
I mean, the footage right there shows him injured. It's not severe, but he blocked the shot with his shield and has super durability. He can literally survive falling out of a building with protection from a shield.
On top of this, the highly specialized Hydra agents choose to walk very slowly clustered in a group with no cover, spraying all their ammo at absolutely nothing.
Running creates more instability if you want to shoot at people. Walking is generally considered better for shooting. If anything, they'd have a higher chance of missing shots if they did run.
The Winter Soldier decides to chase after Nat, and everyone else chooses to focus their attention on Steve. Despite shooting at him a solid 2 minutes ago, every single one of these guys just forgets about Sam.
Because Sam ran away and hid to make it seem like he was evacuating, so that he could get a sneak attack while they're distracted.
Who manages to sneak behind and kill one of the guys that randomly chose to not jump down when the rest of the group did.
It's a form of security so that they're being watched while they go down.
Once again, no one decides to shoot Steve in the legs. They all choose to shoot at the giant indestructible shield instead.
Miniguns are not easy to aim with due to their heavy weight and massive recoil. It's also worth considering that the shooter just lost a few of his guys for unknown reasons and is clearly stressed about Captain America sprinting at him, which could factor into sloppier aim. And to mitigate the chances of being shot at, Captain America made a conscious effort to crouch so that his legs weren't super exposed. So it's not like it's this open and easy target.
Nat manages to distract and delay the Winter Soldier long enough for Steve to catch up and engage him in combat. And after a brutal fight, Steve knocks his mask off, revealing it to be Bucky. Now, while this is a dramatic moment for both Steve and the audience, it isn't for Bucky. He doesn't care about doing anything but completing his mission. So him choosing to just stand there not doing anything long enough for Sam to get the drop on him is a bit of an odd thing for him to do.
But you'll notice that Bucky has a confused reaction after hearing his name, and later on he says that he knew Steve. This implies his memories are slowly returning to him. The thing that originally facilitated this is Steve's shocked reaction. His facial expressions alone make it clear to Bucky that Cap recognizes his face, which in itself should be a concern because Bucky was ordered to hide his identity. So even as the Winter Soldier, it's at least concerning that someone knows his identity potentially. But, more importantly, Cap's body language shows him freezing and stopping the fight entirely, which suggests even further that Cap knows the man behind the mask. This is where Bucky's confusion starts to kick in.
More Hydra agents show up, but are unable to kill them as they are in public, and so decide to load them up into a prisoner transport and take them away from the public eye. Then, instead of just killing them in the transport, they decide to take them all the way to some abandoned alley to have them killed.
That's an entirely logical set of events. Why kill them in the truck when this creates a mess in their SHIELD transport vehicles? Wouldn't it be strange if they showed up to the Triskelion with blood all over themselves and the vehicle? Doesn't it make more sense to handle their killings in a secret area in a more clean and controlled manner?
Which allows Maria Hill to rescue them. And I have no idea how she does this.
Through a disguise.
They open the door and there's a hole in the transport, showing that they used the cutting device Fury used earlier. There's two scenarios here and neither of them make sense. The first one is that they cut a hole as they were on their way to the location. This doesn't make sense because as soon as they drop down they would be run over by the vehicles behind them, or at least the vehicles behind them would alert the others that they're escaping. The second scenario is that they escaped as soon as the transport stopped. This means that over the course of 15 seconds, they cut a hole in the transport, dropped down, cut a hole in the concrete, and then everyone somehow managed to drop down before the doors opened.
Yeah, thankfully red lights exist to stop traffic, which they would have used to their benefit at some point during the transport.
On top of this, you would also have all of the noise and bright flashes associated with cutting.
Considering that Hill can discuss her plan with the people in this room in the truck, it's safe to assume that it's soundproofed. Also, I don't know what the brightness would have done considering nobody who wasn't in on the plan was in that part of the truck, and this was being done on the bottom area of the vehicle.
Which apparently no one here sees or hears as they make their way to open the doors.
Because they already escaped by that point. This movie isn't trying to say that they escaped right as they stopped. The hole would have been there if they escaped minutes ago.
The group arrive at a hideout Hill is using, and we discover that Nick Fury is still alive, having apparently used a drug to slow his heart rate down to 1 beat per minute. So Fury should just be brain damaged, right? I understand his body wouldn't need as much oxygen if he's literally just lying on a table asleep, but 1 beat a minute would mean basically no oxygen is going to his brain.
This depends on how long he was in that condition for. This was only done temporarily to convince Hydra that he was dead after the doctors tried to save him. For all we know, this drug only applied for 20 minutes out of the 2 days this plotline takes place over.
Which, on top of his already catastrophic blood loss and organ failures, would cause his brain cells to die. But no, apparently he is completely fine and suffers no side effects after this.
Because it was temporary and he would have had plenty of time for his injuries to be treated, which he didn't even fully recover from.
The plan starts by the group taking control of the communication center and broadcasting a message trying to get the helicarrier launch stopped, which I think is problematic for 2 reasons. The first is that they now lose the element of surprise.
The moment they step on the helicarriers, they're going to be noticed anyway, so why not put the word out so that the SHIELD agents know what they're dealing with and give them the choice to either fight for his mission or to escape to safety. It is highly important to alert people about the fact he's about to engage in combat in this area, especially for civilian safety. In fact, it's highly important for Cap to try clearing his name, because good SHIELD agents could try to attack him, since SHIELD was sent on a manhunt against Captain America based on a series of lies. Cap is going to have more obstacles if he doesn't speak up about this.
We see in the movie that all they need to do is plug in their own drives into the computer network to take control. They somehow manage to sneak into SHIELD to reach the communication center. So I don't understand how, alongside using the digital face technology, they wouldn't be able to sneak into the helicarriers to take control of at least one of them before someone notices something is amiss.
This room can access security cameras. They would have been noticed eventually. This also goes back to what I said earlier regarding why it was so important for Cap to clear his name.
Afterwards, at least one of the helicarriers would be under their control by the time the conflict starts. And Hill still could have played a pre-recorded message afterwards, rallying the people to Cap's cause while only needing to take down 2 helicarriers.
Why are we assuming that they wouldn't be noticed by the time they take control of one of the helicarriers? The helicarriers would have the heaviest security, considering that's where their targeting chips are present, and they need to reach 3,000 feet to be successful. And again, if Cap doesn't clear his name, way more people would be against him, and thus make it harder to enter the helicarriers at all.
Secondly, Cap alerts all of SHIELD that some of the agents are actually Hydra, causing a mass panic in the building. Hydra knows who to fight, but the regular SHIELD agents are completely clueless about who they can trust, being paranoid over Hydra and SHIELD agents alike. They are extremely hesitant and confused over who they're fighting, with Sam even pointing this out. As such, many of them are killed in the confusion. The heroes could have come up with a plan to evacuate the building and get the majority of the SHIELD agents out, but Cap chooses to be as blunt as possible.
Because they're not going to evacuate the building because of what Captain America told them, unless he specifically justifies why they should trust him instead of pursuing their manhunt. And if Cap alerts them that this area will become a war zone before actually doing so, people will have more time to prepare, whether they choose to leave, help civilians evacuate, or to fight with him,
causing Hydra to start to purge as many people as they need to in their quest to get the helicarriers in the air, deaths that could have been avoided.
If Cap is willing to kill in combat, then Cap would potentially have to kill innocent SHIELD agents if they don't know the truth and try to stop him.
Hey Cap, how do we know the good guys from the bad guys? If they're shooting at you, they're bad.
There is a risk either way. It's an even greater risk if all of SHIELD is against Cap, because if Cap fails, millions of people die.
So, the group begins to take over the helicarriers, fully aware that they are facing up against automatic weapons, big open spaces, and long-distance combat. Can someone explain to me why Steve doesn't bother to bring a gun with him? He has no problem with killing, and he has no problem with using guns, yet for some reason he chooses to rush into combat scenarios without a gun when he is most likely facing targets at long range.
Firstly, he doesn't need a gun when he has his athleticism and his shield. Second of all, because he doesn't need a gun, he doesn't have to risk shooting at people that are potentially on his side who would also be on the battlefield. Falcon has the advantage of flying, so he has more maneuverability and control to avoid incidents evidence of friendly fire, but Cap doesn't. Plus, guns make it easier to reveal your location and make it more difficult to sneak around.
And it's only thanks to the fact that they only shoot his shield and keep running up to him that he's able to advance throughout the helicarriers.
The area is filled with smoke, and these guys likely want to avoid friendly fire, so they're more cautious in their approach instead of rushing straight into shooting. The problem for them is that Cap is simply too fast for them, and they couldn't keep up with him.
As Steve is fighting on one helicarrier, Falcon starts to make his way to the other. And instead of just landing on it and doing his job, he chooses to fly over the helicarrier, activating its anti-air weapons which begin to track him.
He didn't land on the helicarrier because of the weapons guarding it. That's the point of him flying around it. He's trying to dodge these shots,
forcing him to waste time trying to outmaneuver them to the point where when he is finally able to get onto a helicarrier, a Quinjet is able to catch up to him and delay him even longer. It's a bit strange for someone who specializes in air combat to deliberately put themselves in a position where anti-air weapons can target them, almost like this movie makes him incompetent at his job in order to add a chase scene and pad the runtime.
Or Falcon is in the situation because the moment he approaches those helicarriers, they'd shoot at him to ensure he doesn't land.
As they do, they are encountered by the Winter Soldier, who, instead of using his grenade launcher, or a machine gun, or a Scorpion, chooses to punch them instead, taking Sam out of the fight but failing to kill either of them.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Fury arrives to assist Nat in decrypting the files, using his and Pierce's alpha level clearance to start dumping the files. And then, and I cannot stress this enough, Nat, Fury, and the other defense secretaries choose to just stand around and do absolutely nothing as Pierce picks up his phone, allowing him to detonate the name badges and kill the secretaries. They're all just stood looking at this holographic screen that says files decrypting instead of keeping an eye on the mass murdering lunatic next to them.
Okay, it's not flawless.
Leaping out of a window and into a helicopter flown by Fury. And for some reason, Nat is now fully dressed up in her tactical gear and doesn't seem to be suffering any after effects of a taser that has been knocking people unconscious throughout all these movies.
Yeah, I imagine she'd have some of her tactical gear underneath the disguise, then put more of it on after the mission in case she needs to engage in combat later to help Steve. Also, it is realistically possible for people to get up after being hit with a taser. She was knocked unconscious at first, but got up afterwards.
None of the villains have any arcs.
Do they need to?
None of the side characters have any arcs.
Cap, Nat, and Fury have arcs. I don't think we need more side characters to have arcs just for the sake of it. Sharon is barely in this movie.
And Sam is a chilled, relaxed guy who likes to help people and is exactly the same at the end of the movie.
Sure, Sam doesn't have any major changes, but we still get good material from him as a character. He's a good guy who likes to help, but we learn about why he does so. He can relate to the feelings of loss and guilt because of what happened to his wingman in his military experiences, so he uses that tragedy as a motivator to help others with whatever problems they have going on in their lives. That tells us a lot about his character and makes it more meaningful when he chooses to help Cap since he wanted out of the military for years.
So, Steve and Fury. Towards the end of the film, we see Fury help Nat release the files for S.H.I.E.L.D. all over the internet, which would essentially destroy the organization and reveal any allies and resources he has for others to snatch up for themselves. And for the life of me, I have no idea why he does this. He doesn't want S.H.I.E.L.D. to go down. Hell, he still doesn't really have an ethical problem with Project Insight up towards the start of the final battle.
Yeah, he doesn't want S.H.I.E.L.D. to go down, but he believes it should after he was seriously challenged by Cap and forced to reflect on his work over the years.
S.H.I.E.L.D.'s been compromised. You said so yourself. Hydra grew right under your nose and nobody noticed.
I noticed.
How many paid the price before you did?
Fury keeps telling himself that he had it under control, but the fact of the matter is that Hydra corrupted it under his nose and he acted far too late. And Fury's ideology for Project Insight enabled Hydra's plans in the third act. This was a project that Fury pushed for.
After New York, I convinced the World Security Council we needed a quantum surge in threat analysis. For once, we're way ahead of the curve.
Why make me head of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Because you were the best and the most ruthless person I ever met. Our enemies are your enemies, Nick. Disorder, war. You didn't ask, you just did what had to be done. You have the courage to take it?
No, I have the courage not to.
He seemingly wants to remove Hydra and retake control of S.H.I.E.L.D., but then Steve gives him a pep talk and apparently everything good that S.H.I.E.L.D. has done is worthless and he's just going to take down his entire organization.
That's not what Steve was saying. Steve was saying that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been corrupted to the core, so it needs to be taken down. That doesn't mean the best of S.H.I.E.L.D., who helped do good for the world, shouldn't be able to help. Nat is still an Avenger, Hawkeye is still an Avenger, and Fury returns in Age of Ultron with a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier with a team of old S.H.I.E.L.D. agents that he knew were trustworthy.
This is what S.H.I.E.L.D's supposed to be.
instead of just looking up at the Hydra files and using S.H.I.E.L.D.'s resources to hunt them down.
The purpose of taking down S.H.I.E.L.D. is so they're not in a position of power to abuse, especially during an investigation of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Randomly choosing to destroy his entire life's work because the movie says he has to.
Because as it stands right now, it's bringing more harm than good. It's like how Iron Man destroyed his life's work because it brought more harm than good.
And I know what you're thinking. What do you mean Nat's the only person with a good character arc? Steve's arc is really good, why am I not praising that? And the answer to that is he doesn't have an arc.
He does have an arc. Steve starts out not knowing how to adjust to the modern world he's awakened to. Many of his actions are a product of his emotional ties to his past, but he's struggling with the fact that he has to move forward with the world.
For as long as I can remember, I just wanted to do what was right. I guess I'm not quite sure what that is anymore. And I thought I could throw myself back in and follow orders, serve. It's just not the same.
You saved the world. We rather mucked it up.
You didn't. Knowing that you helped found S.H.I.E.L.D. is half the reason I stay.
The inner conflict for Steve is that he's struggling to maintain purpose in a world he feels out of place from. The most he has going for himself is to try to relive the days where he served his country. He works under S.H.I.E.L.D. largely to hold on to his past, rather than being at peace with his role as Captain America. He struggles to find someone special to him like he has with Peggy.
Believe it or not, it's kind of hard to find someone with shared life experience.
It's a running gag that Nat is constantly trying to find Steve a date, but it does serve a deeper connection to Steve's character. It ties into the theme of accepting the world has forever changed, and that the best Steve can do is build a new life for himself.
Will you do me a favor? Call that nurse.
What was her name again?
Sharon.
Ultimately, adjusting to a whole new world becomes easier for Steve once he starts accepting it instead of fighting against it. And what I think really demonstrates how Steve has grown to let go of the past was when he decided it was time to put an end to S.H.I.E.L.D. He's doing this knowing that Peggy helped found S.H.I.E.L.D., which is why he was attached to S.H.I.E.L.D. to begin with. He started out not knowing what the right thing to do was. While S.H.I.E.L.D. has done plenty of good for the world, and Steve could be of great service with them, he can't get behind Fury's methodology that he has recently displayed. Because S.H.I.E.L.D. represents Peggy's legacy, he has to believe in what S.H.I.E.L.D. has to offer to the world, but seeing the horrors it has brought to the world, and will bring if he doesn't stop it, Cap grows the courage to set aside his emotional attachment to his past and make a firm decision on where his morals should lie.
S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra. It all goes.
Though he wants to find Bucky at the end of the film, he has managed to grow comfortable in his place in the world and accepting change in his life instead of fighting it. That is a really compelling journey to put a character like Captain America on, so I fail to see how Cap doesn't really have an arc in the story.
Seriously, I've got no idea where he used to be on the right side, and then he has to deal with the fact that the people he's working for might not be as moral as he is sentiment for this film has come from. In the first Avenger, Steve does what is morally right and stands against his government when he thinks they're wrong. In the Avengers, Steve does what is morally right and stands against the government when he thinks they're wrong. In this film, Steve does what is morally right and stands against the government when he thinks they're wrong.
The difference is that in Winter Soldier, Steve doesn't know what is morally right at first. That's where his character arc starts to progress. If Steve were to give up on S.H.I.E.L.D., that means giving up on Peggy's legacy and the work she did to facilitate S.H.I.E.L.D.'s contributions to the world. That's not an easy decision for him to make when he stays attached to his past and struggles to move forward with the world.
One of Steve's first official acts as Captain America is to disobey a direct order from his commanding officer and doing the right thing, regardless of the personal consequences. And that's all he does in this film as well. He stands against S.H.I.E.L.D., who he later learns is Hydra, because he doesn't trust them to do the right thing, and refuses to back down regardless of the consequences. He has no arc, he's just the same guy. Which is fine, by the way. I like Steve as a character. I just wish people would stop going on as if he has some sort of great arc in this film when nothing really exists.
This is a confusing point to me because I'm expecting to hear about why this movie is a mess, but this sounds to me like this isn't even a criticism of the movie, but rather a response to the praise the movie gets, which is fine, but this feels like this belongs in a different video.
And while we're talking about defying the government, this film and the political weight it could hold is heavily watered down as soon as it becomes apparent that the bad guys are not S.H.I.E.L.D., but Hydra. Ignoring the massive plot hole created from this decision, it just seems kinda lazy and forced so the heroes don't have any questionable decisions. If it was Cap actually taking a stand against the US, that could be a good avenue to explore explore ideas of morality and trust in the government, and focusing on the concept of to be lawful or to be good. But then this is all sucked out of the window because they're actually fighting against a secret Nazi cult, so there's actually zero issues with fighting against them.
Except Pierce, without revealing he's the leader of Hydra, managed to convince people into a set of beliefs for why Project Insight is necessary. Fury is convinced by this as well. The nuance behind Project Insight is that even well-intentioned, decent people like Nick Fury can be convinced that something this controlling and restricting of people's rights is necessary to keep the world safe. There is still a discussion to be had on if the freedom of citizens is a worthy sacrifice for constant oversight for the sake of security.
It's just so lazy, as is the messaging of Project Insight. Project Insight is 3 heavily armed helicarriers that can be used to eliminate anyone at any time anywhere across the globe at a flick of a switch. The stance that the movie seems to want us to take is the stance our hero has, that we can't punish people before they commit a crime, and you can't just hold a gun to the planet and say that it's okay because you're protecting people. Hydra wanting to be able to do what it wants without answering to an authority or worrying about the law and morality is their primary goal throughout the movie, but the film itself seems confused about whether it truly believes Project Insight is despicable or not. At one point in the film, we get this scene.
What if Pakistan marched into Mumbai tomorrow, and you knew that they were going to drag your daughters into a soccer stadium for execution, and you could just stop it with a flick of the switch? Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you all?
Not if it was your switch.
Okay, so you're perfectly fine with Project Insight, you just don't like the fact that Pierce is in charge of it.
Which highlights the flaw with Project Insight. If you trust people with this much power over people, then you can easily end up misplacing that trust at the cost of many lives.
If Fury took control of S.H.I.E.L.D. and he wiped out anyone who threatened you, you would be okay with that?
The Council doesn't speak for this movie's messaging as a whole. Cap, the main character, is saying that nobody should have that power, not even Fury.
It's the exact same with the opening, where Cap just goes around randomly killing who he wants and knocking others unconscious, making us question why some of them deserved to die and others didn't.
Cap doesn't believe they deserve to die, he just believed the risk was worth taking to save the other people. Obviously, there can be a discussion on whether or not Cap should make extra efforts not to kill people, but that's not the focus of how this film touches upon the topic of freedom versus security. The thing you're talking about is more so about believing in second chances even for the worst of people, which is often explored in more Spider-Man or Daredevil stories. That pretty much covers all of his criticisms. While I heavily disagree, I can appreciate the attempt to go into detail and discuss what you think works or doesn't work. Thanks for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this video. Be sure to subscribe and like the video. Leave a comment on what you think about this movie and the criticism. That's all I have for now. Goodbye.